Thanks for joining us here at politicalstorm.com. I'm John Small, and today we're going to actually talk about, do you have to be crazy to get into politics? No, that's not really what we're going to talk about. But we are going to talk with Dr. DrJoyBrowne, and she is a nationally acclaimed syndicated radio host, a licensed clinical psychologist, and she offers advice on issues ranging from relationships and marriage and finances and work and career. And she's won numerous awards for her work, including the American Psychological Association's President's Award, Talkers Magazine Award for Best Female Talk Show Host, number 10 on the list of the 12 greatest radio talk show hosts of all time. She's been named one of the 100 most influential talk show hosts, and she's been singled out for the News Talk Personality of the Year, as well as Syndicated Talk Show Host of the Year by Radio and Record Magazine every year since the list was formed. Again, Dr. DrJoyBrowne will be our guest today, and we're going to talk to her about the psychology of politics. Dr. Browne, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. We're sort of well into the new year.
Well, we certainly appreciate you taking some time to visit with us. Now, as we're discussing politics and people are going, now, why in the world are you talking to Dr. Browne about this? Because we want to talk about the mental health, and we want to talk about how all of the things that these politicians put themselves through and their families through and their volunteers through, this all kind of relates to your field of expertise, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And the candidates themselves. I mean, I get asked a lot about, I actually, on my program last week, said if you could tell the candidates something, what would you tell them? And so, the politics is just how we divvy up power, and there's nothing more psychological than power and divvying things up. So it's certainly in my bailiwick.
So now, as a licensed clinical psychologist and a relationship expert, could you shed some light maybe on what it's like for the spouse of somebody that's running for office? What kind of things do they go through as their husband or wife is running for the office and being in the spotlight like that?
Right, well, let's divide it up, because I think, as you accurately point out, we used to talk about candidates' wives, and now we talk about candidates' spouses, because we have women, thank goodness, sort of in the fray. But let's talk about the women, the spouses who are female to begin with, because that's the more classic pattern. And the deal is, by the time you're running for president, you've been running for office for a long time, and I think those political families make their deals very early on. And we've seen various models. We've seen ones where the spouse is an active campaigner, and in some cases almost as popular, if not more popular than the candidate. And the one who, I think Michelle Obama is probably a good example, even though she hasn't been since she's been in the White House as much, but she's kind of an interesting example of both, in that she had her own life, and at times of the campaign was nearly invisible, and then at times the campaign seemed to overshadow him. And then in the White House, that same kind of dichotomy. But I think for most political wives, they've made their deals very early on. And the deal is, okay, I get, you're not going to be home very much, but I'll get some of the perks, I'll get some of the publicity, but, I either don't want to be involved, I want to be involved in this level, I'll only do the pictures. But long before anybody's talking about running for president or governor or mayor, they've made their deals a whole long time ahead of time. I think what it gets a little trickier is when you have women who are running. Yeah. And, for example, Geraldine Ferrara, husband, essentially single-handedly torpedoed her campaign because of his questionable ties with organizations that are not necessarily friends of the FBI. So, but I think to a very large extent that political families have made their deals very far ahead of time. I think that the issue quite often comes down not so much to the wives, but to the kids. And you see a combination of kids doing sort of serious acting out or kids following the line. But to a certain extent, the American family has really revolved around the husband as historically as breadwinner, as daddy's the one who makes decisions, waits till your dad comes home, the absentee parent. So the political landscape, to a very large extent, up until very recently, has just reflected really traditional American values, where the dad is the one who makes the decisions and everybody else follows along. All of a sudden, where we have women who are saying, I'm not a secondary citizen, and kids who say, I don't want an absentee parent, I don't want to be a public person just because you do, has really changed to a certain extent, we would never have asked these questions 20 years ago. Gee, is it hard to be a wife? Everybody would have assumed, well, she gets all the publicity and she must be getting something out of it, or she would have left them a long time ago. Now we're asking the question because a wife, first of all, is viewed as a helpmate and a huge advantage, and also somebody who can be very disagreeable if she wants to be.
And I like how you had mentioned the children as well, because there is a huge impact on the children. But also think about the extended family, because I remember back when Bill Clinton was running, we all got to meet Roger Clinton. That was on the campaign trail. And if you think back to Carter's, you have Billy Carter. So the siblings, the brothers, the sisters, there's an impact on each of them as well.
Well, and even if you go back as far as the Kennedys.
Yeah.
And so the idea is that to a certain extent it's always been thus, that the family was always able to sort of torpedo things. It just, we didn't pay as much attention because I think the role of politicians have changed, the scrutiny of politicians has changed, and the role of women has changed. And when you put those all together, we're talking about all of a sudden women saying, I don't want you to run, or I'm not going to be involved.
Well, and if you think about one of the other things that has really changed, especially over the last decade, is the number of places people can get their information. With the internet and even things like politicalstorm.com, websites that are devoted to this. There's so many people that are scrutinizing every little action, every little word that was said, and what every little word means. It would be really hard to be in the public spotlight, wouldn't it?
I think it is. I think for any of us who are even faintly in the public spotlight, we understand. I'm one of those people who I now call it fake book because it's neither book. It has nothing to do with faith. As far as I use Facebook specifically for my program, there's no other information. I have none of this social media is about me personally. If I want you to know something about me, I'll tell you, and I'll tell you because I trust you, and there's a reason to tell you. But I don't want strangers knowing things about me. And as you know, as a public person, there's all sorts of stuff that's made up about all of us, and you just don't look at it.
It's funny to read some of that stuff, and you go, okay, I wonder how much of that's real and how much that's just trying to, sensationalize something that did happen, but it's got blown way out of proportion.
Or it didn't happen at all. Somebody actually sent me an email and said, well, these are the two things, which is true, and I said neither, and just let it go at that. I'm not going to play. But, I think what it does, though, is discourage an awful lot of people from running for office thinking, do I really want people to know that my third grade teacher said, I couldn't go to the bathroom, and so, I had an accident in third grade. I mean, do we really want that as part of our legacy? Probably not. That didn't happen to me, incidentally. Don't put it on Facebook.
So we won't quote you on that. So, again, visiting right now with Dr. JoyBrowne. And what you were just speaking of there, talking about how with the scrutiny and that discourages some people from running, it kind of makes you wonder if maybe some of the best candidates might have just stayed on the bench because they said, I don't really want to get into the circus that leads up to the job. So as you look at the candidates that are running, are there candidates that really stand out to you in the profession that you have and say, I feel that this person is pretty well balanced, and I think this person maybe needs to see a psychologist?
Probably, but I don't think it's... That was a naughty question.
I'm
Shame
sorry.
on you trying to lead me down that primrose path. I certainly have my choice of candidates, but to a certain extent, I would argue that anybody who runs for office has to be somewhat arrogant, somewhat narcissistic. Hopefully that a narcissist by definition has no ability to empathize, and one would hope that we sooner or later get somebody in office that actually cares about little people as opposed to the concept of people. But my mother at one point was having a discussion with me, and she was furious with me about something, and she said, I was talking about a political candidate, and I said, I wouldn't vote for them. I think they have nothing in common with the American people. And she said, well, you probably think you can do a better job. But I didn't even hear the sarcasm. I said, yeah, but I could never get elected because I'm incapable of telling anything but the truth. I'll just get in trouble. It's just not going to happen. If somebody asks me what I think, I will tell them, and that's not something that can get you elected. Well, and the other thing is that I have a friend in medical school who said, you can always see both sides of the question, and it just slows you down. Well,
I will ask a much more fair question this time. How does that sound?
Okay.
Without even mentioning anybody's names, because people know the different personalities that we have. One of the things that I've noticed, just as a guy sitting on the sideline, now I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychologist, but we have some uniquely different personalities, and you might even say, as far as I can think back to the elections that I can remember, we might have more personality options right now. One that goes completely one direction, another that goes completely different direction. We may have more personality options in this election than any that I can remember in recent history. Would you agree with that?
I'm not sure I would, to be quite honest. I think that we have more people who are outside the normal political circle. But, I mean, to a certain extent, if you look at it, we've got somebody who's never run for office. We've got somebody who was within the magic circle but is a woman. We've got somebody who's Jewish, and we've never had a Jewish president. We've never really, I think, we have, but remember we had Sarah Palin, we had McCain, we've had Jimmy Carter, we had people from the, so I don't know. It seems to me that the primaries are kind of the vicious weeding out. Remember, I have been frustrated by an awful lot of elections for an awful lot of time. It's almost like any candidate I'm for gets defeated. But we had Barry Goldwater. I mean, it seems to me that I was talking with Mayor Koch in New York, who, whatever else you believed in him, was kind of a stage thinker about the political statement. And he said two things. He said, first of all, in a democracy, you get who you deserve. And second of all, it's amazing how mediocre people will rise to the challenge. Yeah. And I sort of hold that near and dear. There are also, hopefully, enough checks and balances. I'll tell you, my issue at this moment with politics is that nobody talks, or nobody listens. Everybody just yells and talks. And the idea, there have been a whole bunch of studies done in the last 12 years that suggest we only hang out with people who agree with us. And that's a really limiting philosophy. The people are not talking about the issues in meaningful ways of saying, well, what if we take... I would treat politics as a Chinese buffet. We take one from column A and one from column B and C, and then we add a little soy sauce. But that isn't what people do. They say, you're on this side, and and I know that there are issues that one party has suggested the other party absolutely agrees with and will not go along with because they feel if we go along, we look weak and we'll lose the election. Yeah. So, that's what I decry the most in politics, that and lobbyists, that the government really is for sale. And you'd like to think with the diversity that is there and the anti-government, in my years of sort of watching the political scene and being involved in fundraising or running for office or all the kinds of things that most of us do, I don't think I've ever seen a time where Americans have felt more discouraged about their choices, not any particular candidate, but just the ability for anybody in government to keep any sense of integrity, to get anything done, to tell us the truth when they're running. I saw a documentary by Noam Chomsky who was talking about the Depression. He said the economy was much worse then, but the people believed it would get better. Yeah. The economy isn't all that bad, but people don't believe that America's going the right direction or that things are going to get better, and that worries me.
Again, visiting today with Dr. DrJoyBrowne, and thank you again for taking some time to visit with us. Now, speaking of the fact that you're a doctor, and I think this would be a great question to talk to you about, is the volunteers, the people who, they spend all this time volunteering, and it takes a toll because they're giving of their time freely. So when their candidate, we just recently had Jeb Bush announce that he was suspending his campaign. Yeah. We've had several others. So these people that put all this time and all this effort into pushing this particular candidate, and when that candidate drops out, what kind of psychological toll does that have on the volunteers and the people that have been helping on that particular campaign?
Well, I think if you've ever worked as a volunteer on any political campaign, whether on a national level or on student council or anything, have you ever done it?
When my son was running for president of his class, I guess I helped with that. Yes.
Did he win?
He did.
All right, so you're a bad person to talk to.
I'm sorry.
I have, and I think there's a sense. First of all, I'll tell you the good news and the bad news about. The good news is, as you know, working on a campaign. I don't know that your son counts, but we'll give you partial credit for that.
Okay.
There's a sense of elation. He's our candidate. He's my candidate. And volunteers live for FaceTime with the candidate, for a kind word, for a photo op, and it's their way of sort of touching the magic potion. But when it doesn't happen, at least you're not alone. you have a sense of camaraderie that you worked on. And some of those people go on and work for another candidate. There are certainly people who are professional volunteers. It's always been a good way to meet people. It's always been a great way to find a date. Some people do it to find, to network. But before there was LinkedIn, there were political campaigns.
Yeah.
Before there was eHarmony, there were political campaigns. But there is that sense of, that my candidate. But if you listen to the speeches that candidates give when they withdraw, either on election night to concede the election or dropping out early on, they always say, you did a great job, stay involved, the system needs you. And I think a lot of people who are volunteers do get involved in the political process on a local level or and become political operatives. So there is that sense of working for the greater good. And so obviously there's going to be a sense of disappointment the longer you spend. So for people who back a candidate and say that they were there from the beginning, there's certainly more a sense of rest. But people say next year, well, it's kind of like being a Cubs or a Red Sox fan, I think. You always believe in the next year, the next candidate.
And speaking of the Cubs, I thought this was going to be the year. They said so in Back to the Future, so I was so excited.
They lied. Maybe not. Listen, I went to graduate school, medical school in Boston, so I lived through the course of the first of Bambino, and then I worked for a station in New York, and I was talking about the Red Sox and the Yankees and the dreaded pinstripes, and I hear the program director running down the hall saying, "Joy, you're now in New York. You're now a Yankees fan." It's done. I suppose that's the answer to volunteers: is you now become a Yankees fan. You're in New York.
There you go. And that's, what, I think that is great advice. So if people are volunteering or supporting a specific campaign and that campaign suspends, find your next team and start rooting for that team instead.
Exactly. And the issue is that hopefully you're looking to that you were volunteering for that person because they're charismatic, but also because of their agenda, because of their ideas. So go find somebody who has similar ideas or organize around those ideas, because I think American political system will be much stronger when we focus on ideas, not personalities. But I believe in the Tooth Fairy and the Easter Bunny as well.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I've noticed quite often when a campaign is suspended, most of the time, and I shouldn't say most of the time, but there are several times where I've seen, being a supporter of that campaign, I'll get a message from that candidate saying that I'm putting my support behind this person now. So, they'll kind of hopefully send you in the right path.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, Dr. Joy Browne has been our guest today. Dr. Browne, thank you so much for visiting with us. I appreciate taking the time to do this today.
My pleasure, and may the force be with all of us.
There you go. Again, Dr. Joy Browne, nationally acclaimed syndicated radio host, licensed clinical psychologist, and you've heard her right here on politicalstorm.com. Again, our guest today has been Dr. Joy Browne. If you'd like to know more about Dr. Browne, you can also find out where she's on the radio and hopefully in your area at DrJoy.com. That's DrJoy.com. And we certainly appreciate her taking some time to chat with us here on politicalstorm.com. I'm John Small. The preceding broadcast that you've just heard is executive produced by Laurance Rassin, co-founder of politicalstorm.com, line produced, edited, and narrated by John Small from The John and Heidi Show and Sunny Radio. This program is expressly for politicalstorm.com and its affiliated networks and was recorded on Tuesday, February the 23rd, 2016.